Motion today is this House favors the strategy of using for institutional reform to address police abuse and misconduct rather than defunding the police. I am, as the first speaker of opposition team, disagree. Defund the police has been a popular rallying cry at recent protests across the nation. Originated by the Black Lives Matter movement and police reform activists, the slogan was introduced to the public last week and is quickly picking up steam with politicians, city council mayors throughout the country. But what does it really mean? Do away with the police altogether? Severely slash their budget, or maybe using police funds to set up or bolstering existing social programs revolving around education, prevention, community-based activities? And is it a good idea or an overreaction? Realistically speaking, the tightening of a police department budget is not a bad idea. A thorough review of what it is spending its money on is always warranted. Program effectiveness should be the determining factor, as do whether or not program continues into the following budget year or cycle. American policing has never been a neutral institution. The first U.S. city police department was a slave patrol, and modern police force have directed oppression and violence at black people to enforce Jim Crow, wage the war on drugs, and crack down on protests. When people ask for police reform, many are actually asking for this oppressive system to be dismantled and to invest in institutions, resources, and services that help communities grow and thrive. That's why many protesters and activists following in the footsteps of black-led grassroots groups are demanding immediate defunding of police department. The idea of defunding or defacement is new to some folks, but the basic premise is simple. We must cut the astronomical amount of money that our government spend on law enforcement and give that money to more helpful services like job training, counseling, and violence prevention programs. Each year, state and local government spend upward of $100 billion on law enforcement, and that's excluding billions more in federal grants and resources. Budgets are not created in a vacuum. They can be changed through targeted edification and organizing. We can demand that our local officials, including city council members and mayors, stop allocating funds to police to acquire more military equipment and instead ask for that money to go toward community-run violence prevention programs. We can demand that our federal government redirect the money that funds police presence in schools to putting counselors in school instead. As you know, some arrests are made for doing nothing at all beyond being black. We have little evidence, if any, to show that more police surveillance results in fewer crimes and greater public safety. Indeed, funneling police into communities of color and using officers to make arrests just perpetuates harm and trauma. Yet since the 1980s years, spending on law enforcement and our criminal legal system has dramatically outpaced that in community service such as housing, education, and violence prevention programs. Those are the institutions that help build stable, safe, healthy communities. For example, Los Angeles budget give police $3.14 billion out of the city's $10.5 billion. Spending on community service such as economy development $30 million and housing $81 million pale in comparison the massive LAPD budget. On Wednesday night, after years of Black Lives Matter grassroots activists demanding a cut in LAPD's budget. Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti announced he will cut 100 million to 150 million from the LAPD budget and reinvest those funds in communities of color. Similarly, in New York City, the government spent almost $6 billion on policing, which is more than it does on Department of Health, Homeless Service, Housing Preservation and Development, and Youth and Community Development combined. For too long, the focus on police reform has been dominated by reform that try to reduce the harm of policing rather than rethink the overall role of police in society. But 6 years after the Black Lives Matter movement rose to the national attention, activities across the country are coming together to demand what many have known has been the solution all along: defund the police. That's the reason why I disagree with the motion. If there are any wrong words for me, or maybe there are not clearly word for me, please forgive me. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.